The snow was falling without a break, covering the ground like a thick white blanket. The sky was gray and heavy, and the wind screamed like a wild animal. Valia walked slowly through the storm, her arms tight around her tiny child. Her skin was turning blue, her lips were dry, and her hands were shaking. She didn't know how much longer she could keep walking. But she had no choice. She had to find shelter, or they would both die in the cold. Her baby didn't cry anymore. He was too tired, too cold. Velia looked down at him, wrapped in a torn blanket. His little face barely visible. She pulled him closer, using her own body to block the wind. Her own legs were weak, and her head was spinning. But she couldn't give up. Not yet. They had escaped the attack just 2 days ago. Their home was gone, destroyed by fire and war machines. Her husband had died trying to protect them. Now she was alone, walking across a frozen land that didn't care if she lived or died. Velia was not human. Her skin had a soft purple glow, and her ears were long and pointed. She belonged to a peaceful species, known for healing and singing. Not for war, not for survival in snowstorms. But now she was a mother in a world without mercy. She climbed over a hill, but on the other side there was nothing, just more snow, more wind, and more silence. Her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees. Still holding her baby tight, she looked around, but there was no help. No fire, no sound, just death, waiting, patient and cold. Velia sat in the snow, pulled her baby close, and curled her body around him. She whispered a soft song in her native language, a lullaby from a better time. Her voice shook, weak and broken. She closed her eyes and let the snow cover them. If I die, she thought, maybe he will still live a little longer in my arms. Hours passed, the snow kept falling, hiding their bodies under white silence, but not far away. Someone was walking through the storm, a tall figure in heavy armor and a thick winter coat. His name was Rhett, a human. He was a deserter, tired of fighting in a war he didn't believe in. Now he lived alone in the wastelands. Trying to survive with the little he had, Rhett's scanner beeped softly. Showing heat under the snow, he moved quickly, dropping to his knees and digging. He uncovered Velia's face first, then her baby. Both were cold, almost frozen, but the scanner showed a weak life sign. "Hold on," he said, to no one, pulling both of them into his arms. He ran back through the snow, down into a hidden shelter. It was a half-buried pod from an old crash, broken, rusty, but warm inside. Thanks to a small power core he had fixed weeks ago, he placed Velia and her child on a soft mat, lit the heat lamp, and wrapped them in blankets. Then he did something risky but necessary. He removed his coat and shirt, then lay close to them, letting his body heat help them warm up. It was the only way to stop the cold from stealing their lives. He watched them for hours. The baby was still, but then, suddenly, he gave a soft whimper. Then Velia moved slightly, her fingers twitching. She coughed once, then slowly opened her eyes. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. A human, half-naked, beside her. She gasped and tried to move away, but her body was too weak. Then she remembered her baby. She reached for him with shaking hands, and when she felt his warm body breathing, she cried, "You're safe, Rhett," said in a calm voice. "You were almost gone, but I got to you in time." Velia stared at him, eyes wide. "Why?" she whispered, her voice broken. "Why help me?" Rhett looked at her for a moment, then sighed. "Because no one else would," he said. And because it was the right thing to do. She didn't know this man, this human, but he had saved her life and her child's. In the middle of a dead world, he had given them warmth. That warmth was more than heat. It was the first light of hope. Outside, the snow still covered the land like a shroud. But inside the shelter, two souls had met, one lost, one broken, but both alive, and something had begun between them. Something quiet, but powerful, a bond. Made in silence and snow, Ret stood in silence as Valia slowly sat up, her arms still wrapped tightly around the child. Her breaths were shallow and her body was trembling, but her eyes were awake now, alert, afraid. And filled with questions, she looked around the small, pottled metal walls. Wires, a flickering heater core, and a man she had never seen before. He didn't speak at first. He just handed her a small packet of warm liquid. It was basic nutrient broth, not delicious, but enough to help her stay alive. She looked at it, hesitated, then reached out with shaking hands and drank. The baby stirred in her arms and gave a soft cry, weak but alive. The sound made her eyes water again. She held him closer, her fingers brushing his small cheek. He was warm now. Not from her, but from the man who had found them buried in the snow. "What is this place?" she asked in a rough voice. Ret knelt by the heater and adjusted a broken panel. The sparks behind it faded, and the room glowed more gently. "Old crash site," he said. "I fixed what I could." He glanced at her butt, didn't move closer. "You were lucky I found you. The scanner barely picked you up." Velia didn't feel lucky. Her body still ached. Her thoughts were a blur. Everything was still spinning, but one thing was clear: without this human, she and her baby would be dead. She watched him quietly as he placed a piece of cloth between them. It wasn't a wall, but a line, a way to make her feel safe. He lay on his side, arms crossed, eyes on the ceiling. "You're not from here," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, I'm from Earth," he replied. "I came here as a soldier." She frowned. "But you saved me, your people. They destroyed my city." He turned his head, his face hardening. "I left them," he said. "I didn't agree with what they did. I'm not part of that anymore." Silence fell between them again. Heavy and cold, only the crackling sound of the heater filled the air. Velia looked down at her baby. His eyes were open now, wide and glowing, just like hers. "What's his name?" Ret asked after a while. She hesitated, then answered, "Kale." "That's a strong name," Ret said. "He's all I have left," she whispered, her voice shaking. The quiet turned softer, less like fear, more like understanding. Time passed slowly inside the pod, hours blending into each other. Ret moved around carefully, fixing things, rationing food, melting snow for water. He never touched her, never crossed the line he had made, but he kept her and the child alive. One night, the wind outside grew louder. A blizzard had arrived. Snow slammed against the pod, and the heater flickered dangerously. Ret checked the core again, his brow wet with sweat despite the cold. Valia watched him, holding Kale close. She could see how tired he was, how rough his hands looked, how quiet he had become. The light died for a second, the warmth faded. Valia gasped as the chill returned like a ghost. "I'll fix it," Ret said quickly, opening a panel and crawling halfway inside the engine space. Sparks flew as he connected wires. His hands burned slightly, but he didn't stop. Not until the core hummed again and the heat returned. Velia stared at him. Something strange growing in her chest. She had hated humans all her life. They were loud, cruel, greedy, but this man, this quiet, broken soldier, was nothing like the monsters she had imagined. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. Neither could Ret. Their breaths were soft, but the silence between them was heavy. With unspoken things, "Why did you save me?" she asked again. "Really?" He didn't answer right away, then finally said, "Because I've taken life before, more than I want to admit." He turned his face toward her, his eyes tired. "This time, I wanted to give it back." Velia's throat tightened. She looked down at Kale, then back at Ret, and for the first time since the war began, she whispered, "Thank you." That single word filled the room like sunlight through a crack, and even though the blizzard outside raged louder than ever inside that small, broken pod. Something had changed, not just warmth, not just safety, but the beginning of something neither of them could explain yet. The snowstorm had stopped, leaving behind a heavy silence that pressed down on everything like a weight. Rhett stepped outside the pod just long enough to check the surroundings. The sky was clear now, but the cold was worse. The kind that burned your lungs when you breathed. He scanned the horizon with his old visor, cracked but still working. The signal light blinked red still. No connection to anything, no rescue, no help. Just more white. He returned to the shelter. Shaking the snow from his boots, Valia was sitting up now, holding Kale in one arm while carefully heating water with her other hand. She had found a way to balance the broken pot over the core vent, clever and calm. Rhett handed her a strip of dried protein and sat down across from her. "He's looking stronger," he said, nodding at the baby. Valia smiled faintly. "He cried last night. Not because he was hurt, but because he was hungry." "That's a good sign," Rhett replied. "Crying means he has fight in him." They ate in silence. Only the quiet hissing of heat between them. Suddenly, a sharp beeping sound came from the corner. Rhett moved quickly to the old comms panel, his face tight. "What is it?" Valia asked. Gripping her child, he stared at the screen. The signal was weak, just a flicker, but it wasn't random. Someone had sent a pulse, a search ping, human technology. He turned to her, his voice low. "They're looking for someone. Maybe me, maybe you." Her eyes widened. "If it's soldiers, they'll kill us both." He nodded slowly. "That's why we have to move." She didn't argue. She only looked down at Kale, then back at Rhett with trust in her eyes. "I can carry him," she said. "I'm strong enough now. But Rhett?" Shook his head. "You carry the pack. I'll carry him. I've done it before." They packed quickly, wrapping supplies in cloth and stuffing them into a canvas bag. Before they left, Rhett pulled a cloth over the heater core and placed 2 metal plates beside it, fake body heat signatures. To confuse any scanners, Valia followed him out, and the cold hit her like a wall. But this time, she was ready. This time, she had someone beside her. They walked for hours, through snow that came up to their knees, across icy hills and broken ground. Rhett carried Kale with one arm, his other hand gripping a metal rod for balance. Valia stumbled more than once, but she kept going, never asking to stop. As they reached a ridge, Rhett suddenly raised a hand and crouched. Valia dropped down beside him. "What is it?" she whispered. He pointed ahead, just below the next hill tracks in the snow. "Not animals, boots, heavy and wide, more than one pair." He scanned again and cursed under his breath. 3 life signs, armed, closing fast. Valia's heart raced. She grabbed Rhett's arm. "We need to hide." They slipped down into a nearby ditch, covered themselves with snow, and stayed completely still. Kale made a soft sound, and Valia placed her lips against his forehead, whispering gently to calm him. Above them, voices echoed through the cold, distorted, metallic. One voice said, "Signal came from here." Another replied, "Keep looking. That traitor has to be nearby." The footsteps were close. Too close. Rhett's hand reached slowly for the knife on his belt. But then one of the soldiers stopped and shouted, "Nothing here, just frozen metal." Moments later, the sounds grew faint, fading into the wind. They waited in silence for a long time before Rhett finally said, "We're clear." Valia sat up slowly, her arms tight around Kale. "They were hunting you," she said. "Maybe both of us now." Rhett replied, standing and wiping snow from his face. Valia didn't say anything for a moment. Then she looked him in the eye. "I won't leave you behind." She said, "You didn't leave me." He looked at her with something like surprise, then nodded once. They started walking again, heading deeper into the snow-covered land. But they both knew the truth. This wasn't just survival anymore. They were being hunted, and the cold wasn't their only enemy. Asterisk, the cold didn't bother her anymore. Not like before. Her legs ached, her arms were tired. But Velia kept walking, step after step. Kale was quiet against her chest, his soft breath warming her skin. Behind her, Rhett scanned the sky every few minutes, his hand never far from the metal rod on his back. They didn't speak much, not because they didn't want to, but because every sound might bring danger. The soldiers were still out there, searching, hunting, and the snow carried sound far. Too far, they reached a canyon just before dusk, its steep walls offering a little shelter. Rhett checked the edges carefully, looking for signs of movement. Once it seemed safe, he guided Velia down a rocky slope into a hidden hollow below. "This should protect us from drones," he said, helping her sit on a flat rock. She unwrapped Kale carefully, touching his cheeks, his fingers, his little feet. Still warm, still alive, she looked up at Rhett, who was now setting up a small heat device using scrap parts and a cracked solar core. "You've done this before," she said softly. He nodded. "I've lived off broken tech for 2 years." "Alone, yes?" Velia lowered her eyes. Brushing her child's hair with her fingertips. "Alone is hard," she whispered. Rhett paused. His back still turned to her. "Yeah," he said. "It changes you." The fire flickered to life, a soft blue glow, barely visible from a distance, but enough to warm the air around them. Enough to bring life back into their fingers and bones. Velia handed Kale to Rhett gently, surprising him. "He likes your voice," she said. "It calms him." Rhett held the small child awkwardly at first, then more confidently as Kale reached up and grabbed his finger. For a moment, the wind outside was the only sound, and it felt like the war didn't exist. No soldiers, no guns, no fear. Just 3 beings sharing heat and silence under an alien sky. But that peace didn't last long. From the top of the canyon, a sharp sound echoed, metal scraping against rock. Rhett jumped up, motioning Velia to take the child. She grabbed Kale and backed against the canyon wall, her heart racing. Above them, a figure appeared. Silhouetted by the fading sky, it wasn't human. It had long limbs, a narrow face, and glowing red eyes. A scavenger beast, drawn by heat, drawn by the scent of life. Rhett didn't wait. He picked up a stone and threw it hard at the creature. Hitting it near the jaw, it shrieked and leaped down, crashing into the snow just meters from them. Velia screamed and covered her child. Rhett ran forward, grabbing his rod and swinging. The creature dodged and slashed with razor claws, slicing across Rhett's arm. He didn't fall. He didn't stop. He swung again, harder, catching the beast in the side. It yelped and backed away, limping, then hissed and vanished into the shadows. Disappearing over the rocks like smoke, blood dripped from Rhett's sleeve. Velia rushed to him, pulling a cloth from her satchel. "Sit," she said firmly. "Let me see." Rhett sat without a word, his breath heavy. She wrapped the cloth around his arm, hand steady. "You need a healer." "I have one," he said, voice quiet, looking at her. She blinked, then looked away, cheeks warm despite the cold. They didn't speak again for a while. Rhett leaned back against the rock, eyes on the fire. Velia held Kale close, listening. To the night, somewhere far away, a low roar echoed. Not the beast, something bigger. She looked up and saw Rhett already watching the sky. "They're coming closer," he said, "whoever they are." "We can't keep running forever," Velia whispered. "No," he said, "but we're not done yet." She looked at him, really looked. This human, bleeding, tired, hunted, still fighting. Not for himself anymore, but for her, for Kale, something inside her shifted again. Not fear, not sadness, something else. Hope. Rhett didn't sleep. The fire burned low, and his wounded arm throbbed under the cloth. Velia had offered to change the bandage, but he refused. Not out of pride, but because he didn't want her to see how deep it really was. He had fought harder than he ever had before, not for war, not for orders, but for her and the child. He looked across the small fire. Velia was curled up with Kale in her arms, her body forming a protective shell around him. She wasn't sleeping either. He could tell. She was listening, waiting. Her eyes opened slightly and met his. They stared at each other across the space, saying nothing, but somehow saying everything. She finally spoke, voice soft and calm. "I was supposed to die out there. You?" "Didn't," he said. "No," she whispered, "because of you." He didn't know how to respond, so he just looked at the fire again. She sat up slowly, pulled the blanket tighter around Kale, then shifted to sit closer to him. The space between them disappeared like melting ice. He could smell her now, cold, but clean, like forest air. Her voice was quiet. "Like a memory. My people don't believe in second chances." He turned to her, surprised. "We believe when something is broken, it should stay broken. That's a sad way to live," Rhett said. "It was never meant to be sad," she replied. "Just simple. And what about you?" He asked, "Are you broken?" Velia didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his injured arm. He let her take it this time. Her fingers were warm now, gentle but steady. She unwrapped the cloth, looked at the cut, then closed her eyes and placed both hands around it. A soft, golden glow pulsed from her palms. Rhett flinched. Not from pain, but from the strange warmth spreading through him. In moments, the ache faded. The blood stopped. The skin began to knit together. When she pulled her hands away, the wound was almost gone. He stared at her, amazed. "You're a healer." She nodded once. "I wasn't strong enough to save my husband," she said, "or my neighbors. But maybe I was meant to save you." His throat tightened. He looked at her face, drawn but strong, eyes wide and full of something he couldn't name. "I don't need saving," he said quietly. "Maybe not," she replied. "But you deserve to be seen." The wind outside had died down, but inside, something else was rising. Not heat, not fear. Something closer, something warmer. Rhett reached for her hand. Not thinking, not planning, just moved by whatever was between them. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled into his. Small and delicate, her head rested on his shoulder a moment later, and Kale's tiny hand brushed against Rhett's arm. The moment was soft, fragile, but real. They weren't lovers, not yet. They weren't family, not yet. But they weren't strangers anymore. When Velia finally whispered again, her voice trembled. "Would you have left us if the signal never came?" "No," Rhett said, without hesitation. "I wouldn't have." She closed her eyes, leaning into him more. "We can't run forever." "No," he said again. "But I'll run as far as I have to, for you too." A single tear slid down her cheek. Not from pain, not from fear, but because someone had chosen her. Not as a burden, not as a duty, but as something worth protecting outside. The stars slowly began to show through the thinning clouds, and below them, in a quiet canyon, a woman, a child, and a soldier shared one silent, unspoken truth. They were no longer alone. Rhett woke. Before the sun, the world still frozen in darkness. Velia was still resting beside him, Kale asleep in her arms, both peaceful. But Rhett's instincts were no longer quiet. Something had changed in the air, not cold this time. Not the wind, something else. He stood slowly, checking the scanner he had buried in the snow the night before. It was blinking again, faster now. Not just one signal, but three, closing in from different directions. He narrowed his eyes. They weren't patrols. They were tracking them. Rhett returned to the cave. His boots crunching against the frost, Valia sat up quickly, eyes alert. "What's wrong?" she asked, holding Kale closer. "We've been found," he said, not hiding. Her breath caught. "How long?" "Not long," he replied. "They're closing in." She stood without another word. Slinging their pack over her shoulder, Rhett grabbed his weapon. The rod now sharpened at one end and wired to shock. They left the canyon in silence, moving fast, cutting through icy rocks and steep paths. The baby stayed quiet, as if sensing what was at stake, but it wasn't enough. They had barely made it over the next ridge when Rhett heard the sound. Engines low and humming, a small drone zipped overhead, scanning the snow. Rhett shoved Valia and Kale behind a boulder. He waited, heart pounding. The drone paused in midair, then shifted direction. It hovered over them like a hawk, before Rhett. "Kudek," a loud voice echoed from a nearby cliff. "Drop your weapon, soldier." He stepped out slowly, hands raised. 3 figures stood above him, 2 humans in military gear. 1 alien in black armor, all armed, all staring straight at him. "We thought you were dead, Rhett." The man in the middle said, "You went rogue." Rhett didn't answer. "I see you've got company," the alien officer said. Her eyes narrowing, a deserter. "Hiding with the enemy. She's not the enemy," Rhett growled. "She's a mother." The officer raised her weapon, and her kind killed hundreds of ours. Valia stepped out before Rhett could stop her. She held Kale tightly, but looked straight at the soldiers. "If you want someone to blame, blame the war," she said. "Not my child." For a moment, there was silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then something unexpected happened. The younger soldier, barely out of training, lowered his weapon slightly. "Sir," he said to the officer, "she has a baby. She's not even armed." The officer glared at him. "Orders are clear." She snapped. "Deserters are to be detained, hostiles eliminated." Rhett moved in front of Valia. "If you want to follow orders," he said coldly, "you'll have to shoot through me." The officer hesitated, just for a second. But that second was everything. Behind her, a new sound came from the horizon. A deep hum, louder than drones. A craft was approaching, marked black, not from Rhett's faction, not from any known human force. Everyone turned to look. Confusion spreading. "What is that?" one soldier asked, before anyone could answer. The craft opened fire. A blue beam sliced the ridge, and the cliff exploded, sending everyone flying. Rhett grabbed Valia and Kale, pulling them behind a rock. As debris rained down, the soldiers screamed, scattered. The officer didn't rise again, buried under snow and stone. The craft hovered, scanning, hunting, but it didn't fire again. Instead, it turned slowly, then vanished into the sky. As quickly as it had come, Rhett helped Valia stand, blood on his lip. "What the hell was that?" she asked, shaking. "Not human," Rhett said, eyes still fixed on the smoke, and not friendly. They looked around. Only one soldier remained, the young one. Frozen, still alive, he stared at them, confused and afraid. Rhett walked up slowly. "You gonna shoot us?" he asked. Voice flat, the soldier shook his head, dropped his weapon, and whispered, "I didn't sign up for this." Rhett nodded and turned away. "Then don't follow us." They walked again. Into the snowy trees, wounded but alive. But now something had changed. They weren't just running from soldiers anymore. Something else was hunting too, something no one understood yet. Snow fell gently now, like feathers from the sky, soft and quiet. No storm, no wind, just stillness. But Rhett knew better. Silence didn't mean safety. He moved through the icy trees, eyes scanning, weapon ready. Valia walked behind him, carrying Kale close to her chest, her eyes tired but focused. The young soldier who survived the ridge stayed behind, just as Rhett told him to. But Rhett knew more would come. And worse, he didn't forget that black craft. It wasn't human, and it wasn't done. They found a narrow cave by a frozen river, just large enough to rest. Rhett started a fire while Valia melted snow in a small tin cup. Kale was hungry, tired, but still strong. That was all that mattered. For now, they were safe. Rhett sat by the fire, staring into it like it could tell. The future Valia watched him in silence. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't thinking about rest. He was thinking about the next move. "Say it," she whispered. Rhett looked up. "Say what? You don't think we'll make it?" He didn't lie. "Not all of us," he said quietly. She looked down at Kale, then at Rhett. "You don't get to decide that alone." He didn't argue, but his hand curled into a fist near the fire. Later that night, the silence broke again. The scanner beeped once, then turned red. Rhett grabbed it, eyes narrowing. Something was approaching. And fast. He stood, pulling on his coat. Velia grabbed his arm. "We stay together." "No." Rhett said firmly. "If it's what I think it is, staying together gets us all killed." "Oh, jeez." She stepped in front of him, eyes burning. "I won't let you leave us to die." "You're not dying," he said. "I'm making sure you live." Suddenly, a low growl filled the cave, not from outside's inside, above them. In the cracks of the rock, a shape dropped from the shadow's metal. Legs, smooth skin, red eyes. It wasn't a creature. It was a machine. The black craft hadn't left. It had sensed something that didn't care about sides or reasons, something that just cleans. The thing lunged. Rhett pushed Valia behind him and swung the rod hard. Electricity snapping, it hit the machine in the head. Stunning it for only a second, it slashed back, cutting Rhett across the chest. He fell back, coughing blood. Velia screamed, shielding Kale with her body. The machine turned toward her, stepping forward with cold precision. But Rhett stood again, face pale, eyes wild. He grabbed the charge core from his coat, the same one he used to power their fire, and ran toward the machine. "Rhett, no Valia," shouted. He didn't stop. He slammed the core against the machine's chest and wrapped his arms around it. The charge exploded. Fire and light filled the cave, and both Rhett and the machine were gone when the smoke cleared. Only ash remained, and silence returned. Velia dropped to her knees, shaking. She looked at the small spark left in the snow haze. Dog tag, melted but still whole. She picked it up with trembling hands. Holding it close to her heart, Kale reached up and touched her cheek. A single tear slid down her face. But she didn't break. Not this time. She stood and walked out of the cave into the cold morning light. No longer just a mother, now a survivor, now a protector. She would tell her son one day about the human who gave up everything, not for glory, not for war, but for love. And far above, as the sun finally rose across the frozen land, the snow sparkled like stars, like a silent promise that somewhere out there, humanity still mattered.